It's been a month since Helene here in the Carolinas. Where do things stand and what comes next? This is a live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group on this Halloween Eve, October 30th, 2024. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We got a big panel for you here tonight, including Scotty Powell in Myrtle Beach, Frank Strait in Columbia, South Carolina, saying hello to Tom Miner. Evan Fisher will be joining us in a few minutes to update us on life in the western North Carolina mountains. And we welcoming in Julia Kauffman from here in Charlotte at WCNC, who is going to update us a little bit on what she saw last week when she went to Chimney Rock, one of the hard-hit areas in the foothills and the western North Carolina mountains. The town largely still closed and cut off to the outside world. And so, Julia, that's why we are really glad you're able to join us for a few minutes tonight here on this live edition of the Carolina Weather Group on Facebook and YouTube. So you could talk a little bit about what you saw last week, because I think so many of us are still thinking a lot about those folks. What was it like to go to Chimney Rock?
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here and shine a light about the recovery efforts in Chimney Rock, because, boy, they have a lot of work ahead of them for months to come. I mean, I've personally never seen devastation like that before. We had the privilege to go get a firsthand look at, the cleanup happening through NCDOT. They piled all of us news partners up in a van and took us down to areas where roads are still closed, where the public can't get to unless, of course, you're volunteering or you're a business owner. And that's because the roads were quite literally swept away by the river when it flooded the village. So NCDOT has been working with contractors to build temporary roads down there so that business owners, homeowners can actually even access, their properties.
Getting there, I imagine, was also a feat. You'd have to travel from Charlotte, going through places like Lake Lure. What did you see along the way?
Yeah, driving through the Lake Lure area toward Chimney Rock was also shocking. I wish I could have seen the lake before the storm. I know
Sure.
it's a very popular area. Lots of people love to vacation there, but I did obviously notice piers swept away. The water levels were really low, and where there were areas where you could tell there were some remnants of playgrounds or parks, pedestrian bridges into the lake. They were just either covered in, I don't know if it was inches or more of dirt and mud, or, they were just gone. They were swept away from the rising waters. So I will say, driving in, you saw some damage, but then as you got closer and closer to the downtown main area of Chimney Rock is when my jaw literally hit the floor. Houses and businesses that lined the river were ripped in half. If they were still standing, there was an entire area that was down on the river in Chimney Rock that had several businesses in it. I'm told a brewery, an ice cream shop, etc. They were gone. And it wasn't because they were bulldozed and cleaned away. It was because they literally were taken by the river. Those were the houses we saw that were ripped in half. You're seeing on your screen now. And it was because the river it widened, I was told, from about 50 to 70 feet in some areas up to 200 feet and rose, tens of feet above its usual water levels. So it just, the power of that, as you can imagine, just took away all the infrastructure with it, unfortunately.
Julia, I can relate to what you mentioned, because I too had not been to Lake Lure or to Chimney Rock. I'd always meant to go, and I hadn't gone. And now I know things like the Flowering Bridge and Lake Lure are gone, and the community is really still trying to recover. When you were there, was there any particular needs that you saw where people from the outside who might be looking to pitch in from afar? Did it seem like the community needed anything in particular?
Great question. So, the first thing that comes to mind is, the bright side of being there was there were so many volunteers on the ground, gutting businesses. The businesses that survived were ruined with flooding, so they have to be gutted, rebuilt. And so when I was there were volunteers with this organization called Spokes of Hope. And, this one guy I spoke with, he's like, I don't have construction experience, but I know how to, rip wood off of a wall or, clear this debris out of a building. So they need a lot of hands on deck, I think, for manual labor, because, unfortunately, a lot of these businesses, a lot of these homeowners, they don't have flood insurance. So then it's, okay, how do we pay for rebuild? How do we pay to, put one foot in front of the other and try to find a new normal? And so volunteers are stepping in and trying to help fill that gap with contract work. So I think looking into organizations where you can actually go and volunteer and help, lend an actual helping hand. And the other thing, I mean, when I was in Boone covering recovery efforts, they were saying, Samaritan's Purse was telling me, we get volunteers on the weekends and that's great. Thank you for your help, but we're going to need volunteers during the week. Months and months to come. So just to not forget about Western North Carolina, and if you can actually go physically in person and help with either loading up supplies or cleaning out debris in houses or businesses, that's going to be needed for a while.
Let's go over to Evan. He's got a question for you, Julia.
Sure. So one of the critical bridges for the Batcave community, which is just upstream of Chimney Rock, has been out for weeks since the storm. Thankfully, that was repaired today. But I'm curious, while you were there, did you see residents coming down from the Batcave area down the gorge into Chimney Rock? I'm just trying to get an understanding of the state of that road down there.
That's a really good question. So what I was told by NCDOT officials is we were in the main area and it had taken them weeks just to get basically a mile down from. So they're working to try to connect Chimney Rock back to Batcave with temporary roads until they can build, permanent roads. And I'm told it's about a 2.5 mile stretch. And I believe they were a mile into that stretch. And this was, I think, a week ago when we went. Sorry, time's bleeding together at this point. But they were about halfway there, it sounded like, and their priority before they got to connecting towns or major roadways, they told me, is getting houses access from their driveways to a temporary road. So people that are in those homes can get out and have emergency access if needed. So I'm not sure if they've made it to Batcave at this point, but I know it's a goal of theirs.
Julia, we'll take one more question here from Scotty before we let you peel off.
Hey, Julia. First of all, thanks for joining us. One question that I have for you is, we have learned through this that the flooding has honestly widened the rivers. And so we've heard this story throughout all of Western North Carolina. And so when you were with DOT crews, were they discussing maybe having to make new roads because of the river widening so much throughout areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly what they're doing. So before they could even build these temporary roads, they had to, I think they called it rechanneling, where they literally had to push the river back to where they could approximate it was before, so that then they could use the mud and the debris and the rocks that were left in that area that's now dry. The river was there, they push it back, and then they have this area now where they can pave temporary roads, so work vehicles, emergency crews can get through, people that live there can get through. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. They're not in some areas, I was told it still was way wider, like 200 feet wider, or 200 feet wide when it should be 50 to 70 feet wide. But in that main Chimney Rock area, they had pushed it back. But literally, the roads were gone. Even the actual asphalt was ripped away and gone. So they are trying to even approximate where the original roads were and then build from there. But in some areas, they can't put the roads exactly where they were because there's a drop off or there's debris or whatever. So they're paving a new path that's safe until they can go back in and put permanent roads.
And that just, I guess, kind of shows that this is not a month or 2 month or 3 month rebuilding process. Right. This is going to take months upon maybe years before everything kind of gets settled back to where it needs to be.
100%.
Julia, we appreciate that perspective. I know we need to let you go. You're going to be getting ready for tonight's 11 o'clock news on WCNC Charlotte, covering the election countdown. So we appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us tonight on the Carolina Weather Group.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks, Julia. Coming up in just moments, we're going to talk more with Evan about the state of things there near Asheville and in Black Mountain. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more live from the Carolina Weather Group here in just 45 seconds.
Have Have you ever seen what an indoor environmental assessment looks like in a commercial building or business? During a full assessment, we collect data throughout the building and compare the measurements room to room. We can also collect samples that go to a lab, such as the small cassette shown here, which will be analyzed for types and amounts of mold in the air. We follow up with a physical inspection, looking for moisture sources and using moisture meters to determine if any of your building materials are wet.
Go-ESG.com or 336-373-1538. Get subscribed. We are counting down to the 500th episode of the Carolina Weather Group, and it's going to be one you're not going to want to miss. There it is, our first teaser for our upcoming 500th episode special of the Carolina Weather Group. See if anybody can guess where that is. We'll maybe reveal it here shortly tonight. But like so many of our big productions, it will be available first to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/Carolina Weather Group. And also coming soon, our YouTube memberships. So we'll run those in parallel. You can join us on Patreon. You can join us on YouTube, whatever you like best. The episode will be up early, and also extended footage from inside that burning house. Don't worry, that was all for science. Everyone's safe. So we're looking forward to bringing you that episode in just about 2 weeks' time, right here on the Carolina Weather Group. That's probably the most attractive, fiery tease we've ever had, guys. So
yeah, that 500th episode's going to be fire, isn't it?
It's going to be fire and ice. We're going to fire and ice. I think that's at least the background of at least one rock and roll song. Evan is back with us from the Black Mountain area outside of Asheville. And, you know, Evan, it's good to be talking with you again. You've kind of been our eyes and ears on the ground there in the days and weeks since Helene. We'll go through some of the headlines that happened today, but tell us, what is life like there 1 month after the storm?
So I've pulled a bit of a fast one on you. I've actually moved back to my normal.
You moved again?
Well, just a little ways. I'm in North Asheville. So Black Mountain was where I was during the storm. It's where I was for the 3 weeks following the storm. And but I am in North Asheville now, just a quarter mile or so from the French Broad River. So I'm all over town. But as we now surpass 1 month since Helene, life is nothing like it was before the storm. I've been telling people we're kind of establishing a new normal of sorts. And I don't mean that to say that I certainly don't want to be insensitive using the word normal, because there are a lot of people whose lives look nothing like it used to. But we are learning what it's like to live without drinkable water and without a timeline for when that drinkable water will be restored. There are folks in even harder hit areas who are learning to live without a home. We're living in tents. Thankfully, we have a lot of volunteers who are showing up and helping all of these folks who have lost homes, lost vehicles, help them recover and help them clean up their properties as well. But it will be months and years before some of these folks see a return to pre-storm normals. Most people have power at this point. Most people have running water. Those are two really big victories in the last 10 to 14 days. But there are still some, especially in places like Yancey County and Mitchell County, that do not even have power yet, which is remarkable and terrible. After 4 weeks, we're blessed by this stretch of warmth right now. In all honesty, it's helping hold off some of those winter chills for folks who are living in tents at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point as we, come into the winter months, come into the colder months, and certainly could be dealing with chillier weather than we have. Evan, you said something really pertinent there when you talked about volunteers, and I'm going to just hijack for a second, because before we get too far away from the conversation we just had with Julia about Chimney Rock and Lake Lure, I wanted to read this message that was posted to Facebook yesterday by one of the fire departments in that area, and I think it's kind of pertinent to what you were talking about too here. So when it comes to that Chimney Rock area, the fire department says, we feel like we need some clarification made about the road between Batcave and Chimney Rock. And this speaks to your question earlier in the show as well, Evan. They say that they're not trying to take away from any of the efforts that you might have seen on social media or elsewhere about a group of volunteers who came through and kind of cut their own road in order to try to get people back to their homes, back to their businesses from a local basis. But they're trying to say this is a temporary road put in exactly for that use, private and emergency use. This does not not mean that Highway 64 or 74 has been repaired or reopened for public travel. The main thing this road has done is allowed some residents to access their home that previously there was no access. It's a very narrow one-lane dirt road. Maybe some of you guys have seen pictures or videos of it. This is the road that they're referring to, and the road that Evan was asking Julia about between Batcave and Chimney Rock, where, you know, it's allowing some local access, but it's probably not fit, Evan, for the average tourist or even the average volunteer who might be working by themselves outside of relief organizations. So when you are seeing relief organizations and volunteers come through your area, I would imagine a lot of it is still highly kind of organized as a recommendation. Is that right, Evan?
It is, and that's difficult because there is a large quantity of people. That doesn't seem like it'd be a bad thing, and it's not, but it's difficult to organize hundreds and thousands of people that come in on the weekends wanting to help. We're thankful for every bit of help that we can get, but people just have to understand that they'll need to be patient if they're coming up here on a Saturday, because there is a lot of work that goes into figuring out where everyone will go, where they can go safely, and who needs that help on that particular day.
Yeah, and Evan, you know, we've been following you on, I still call it Twitter, but I guess I should start calling it X. And you've been chronicling, you have a new initiative that you've started. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I've long wanted to be more Western North Carolina focused. And in the last couple of years, I've started becoming just a little bit more homegrown, if you will. West North Carolina's home is where I'm from. And while I started to focus more nationally at one point on the weather, West North Carolina is what I care about. And about 6 months ago, I had the idea with some fellow meteorologist friends in the area that we wanted to kick off a nonprofit called FORWNC, FORWNC.org. And the idea was we would use that platform to provide weather forecasts in high impact events. It's not daily. Lovingly, I don't have the time for that. But when big events roll around, we wanted to be able to provide useful and actionable information to all the people who follow us in this region. Unfortunately, Helene happened. We weren't ready before Helene, so we didn't provide any forecasts. I didn't even have a website before the storm. It was still an idea. And then in the 3 weeks after Helene, I knew that I wanted to start moving on that quickly, but life was in the way, and we were all trying to survive and find water and food. So it took a little bit of time to get it off the ground. But now I do have this website out, FORWNC.org, and my short-term goal is to use it to share basically summaries of what happened here, because it's really difficult to tell the story of an entire region that was destroyed by one single storm. It's difficult to understand the scope of what happened here. I'm from here. I know all these roads, all these towns, and even I struggle with that. So as you can see here, this is one of the products I've put together. It's far from complete. But the idea is we want to be able to show folks where damage occurred and how widespread that damage was. And it starts by showing reports like this, but we're also spreading that out to show which areas were flooded, who's not necessarily private information, but which homes were flooded, and supporting that local industry, the local friends and family that we have through this platform.
Frank, you have a question for Evan. I think you pulled a Scotty, which is embarrassing because Scotty's here tonight and he can pull his own Scotties.
I pulled a Scotty. Anyway, so Evan, you may not know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. We have an election coming up Tuesday. Obviously, that's an important story, and there are some concerns about people in these heavily impacted areas and how they're going to be voting. And do you have any word about how that process is going for the people in these highly impacted areas to be able to cast their vote in the election Tuesday and for early voting as well?
Yeah, that's a very important topic. And in fact, it's one that we were talking about just within 5 days of the storm. Back when Black Mountain was holding in-person town hall meetings, we'd all gather in the town square. And we talked about that. We talked about how we would be voting when November rolled around. And sure enough, early voting sites have been open for a couple of weeks. But I will also say in some areas there have not been enough of those early voting locations. And in fact, Henderson County just recently opened up more. They were forced to open up more in the past 24, 48 hours, something like that. So that's really right there at the very end. But all of our sites are open to the best of their ability. And certainly on election day, next Tuesday, everything will be open roads will be a challenge. People will have to navigate and find their way there. But I can assure you, these people are resilient, and everyone wants to be there. It was just such a hot and important topic right after the storm that I know people will have already figured out how they're going to get there, and they'll show up to vote on Tuesday.
The North Carolina State Board of Elections has a website. If you're listening to our audio podcast, it's ncsbe.gov/Helene to find your local polling place and check your registration. As Frank just mentioned, early voting goes through Saturday with actual election day on Tuesday. So very important question, guys. That's coming up real fast here. Evan, you tweeted out yesterday that you had watched a YouTube video about just one family, one of many families who have a survival story. I know you were really touched by that video because you took to social to essentially encourage other people to watch it. Can you paraphrase a little bit about what you learned watching that video?
Sure. So Lauren and Brian are a couple who live below the summit of Elk Mountain. I want to say that's Lynn Cove, but there's so many little hollers around here. I can't name every single one, but it's a particular area that probably had the worst wind damage in all of the Southern Appalachians from Helene. We first started seeing some photos and video trickle out of there 7 days after the storm, and it looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 80% of the trees up there fallen during the storm. Winds likely in excess of 100 miles an hour. So this family was stuck in the middle of it, and their story is remarkable. You should absolutely go listen to it. It's on YouTube. Aaron Rigsby is the one who put it all together, and it's here on the screen as well. But they had 90 minutes of hell on earth, if you will, where the trees were crashing down around them. This whole forest fell in an hour and a half. I mean, you can imagine how the ground would be shaking, your home would be shaking. They were lucky to not have too much damage to their home, though they did have roof damage. And it's just remarkable to go up there. I was up there just above their home on Saturday, and though I'd seen the photos, I'd seen the videos, I wasn't prepared for how bad it really was. So I cannot imagine just the trauma, honestly, that this family will have as they come out of this event, as they had to cut their way down 100 fallen trees on their driveway alone to get back down to civilization, to access the outside world. It's just remarkable. And you can see here, this is that clip from just above the home. There are so many trees in this area that have been flattened, and a lot of places will come back. They'll be quite green in the spring, but this particular location will look quite thin simply because of how many trees came down. It wasn't just defoliation, but deforestation.
Yeah, and that's going to be particularly noticeable, like you mentioned, going forward this year and in years to come, as I know so many people love coming to this region as tourists to enjoy the fall foliage, and that will probably be very heavily impacted for many years to come. So I want everybody to stay tuned, because Evan's going to be back with us again next week. We're going to talk more about the data and research he's been looking at, and some of these satellite imageries, kind of the before and the after, understanding the impacts that communities felt both at home, at work, and as Scotty mentioned earlier in this episode, the literal change to the terrain that Helene caused. That's coming next week right here on the Carolina Weather Group. Before we go this week, a few headlines that we want to update you on, and I know some of you have been talking about them. Karen on YouTube accurately recalling a report she saw on Julia's station, WCNC Charlotte, earlier today, where recovery efforts continuing, and they did recover the body of a missing Tennessee woman who was found in Avery County. She was identified today, thinking about all of the families who have lost loved ones, Karen writes on YouTube. And absolutely, it was a somber day here in North Carolina, as the death toll from Helene has now reached 101. You may recall that number at some point was actually a little bit higher. And that's because Buncombe County came out to say that they had realized they were double counting some folks as they were still working through the databases of people who were missing and unaccounted for, or people who maybe were reported missing but were later found safe. As they kind of got that information from families and the like, they were able to update some of their reporting. But either way, it is a somber day, as the death toll from Helene now confirmed to be 101 people in North Carolina alone. The Associated Press putting the tally across the Southeast region at about 215 at least. Talking a little bit more about fall foliage, another section of the Blue Ridge Parkway has reopened, the section west of Asheville. It's in addition to the 20 miles that have opened up near Blowing Rock that we told you about. This is from mile marker about 411 until mile post 421, as well as 423 all the way over to 469, which is about where US 331 near Cherokee and the Great Smoky Mountains interact. So, it's not loading, but there is a really great map out there that shows you which sections are open and closed. WCNC Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich calling out today a new report from internal Duke Energy documentation talking about some of the damage that they received. Although they kind of call it not damage, they do talk about pieces of equipment and infrastructure that will need to be repaired from flooding inside some of the powerhouses and things, in particular in Bridgewater after the storm. So he's going through that, and we hope to tell you more about it in the weeks to come. Hey, guys, how amazing was this? I'll turn the microphones back on for folks. I don't know if you got a chance to watch or listen to any of the concert for the Carolinas last week. $25 million-ish raised at Bank of America Stadium, despite, and the irony is there, we hadn't had any rain since Helene, and as soon as that concert was about to start, lightning and thunder rolled into the area, like right on cue. The concert ended up going until 1 o'clock in the morning. Did anybody get a chance to watch or listen to any of it?
Oh, yeah.
No, because I was driving on I-85 to see my family and got caught in one of those thunderstorms.
One of those, yeah. Oof. So yeah. Frank also found the timing ironic. Evan, any particular moment from the show stick out in your brain?
Oh, goodness. There was one moment in particular that I really wish I had seen. I stepped away for 15 minutes to go get a shower, and I missed the tribute to the Craig family, who is tragically 11 members died in an area that I grew up in Fairview. And that was touching from what I heard. So I missed that, but I will say the show overall was amazing. We stayed up until 12:30 watching.
Yeah, absolutely. A very powerful story. So many sad stories out there, and it's heartwarming, I guess, in a way, to know that they're being seen and heard and felt. All of those hugs from all of the people, the thousands of people gathered there in Bank of America Stadium. Just like Karen said, watching on YouTube, thinking about all of the families who have lost loved ones. Before we go, a couple more headlines here. As Helene recovery continues in the Carolinas, portions of I-26 reopening today between Tennessee and North Carolina. This is the first of two of those major interstates that have reopened. As you probably all recall, I-40 and I-26 were closed after the storm because of the extensive damage that was caused by Helene. It's a bit of a bottleneck, as you can see in this picture here, with the traffic in both directions sharing some of the roadway. But hey, it's something that's open. It's only open to passenger vehicles, not yet open to commercial vehicles. So sorry, truckers, you'll still have to do that very long I-77 detour all the way through Virginia. Alex asking about I-40 at North Carolina and the Tennessee state line is still closed between the two states. There's portions on the Tennessee side that are open to local traffic, Alex, but the actual link between the two states does still remain closed. I think those are most of our headlines this week as we continue to follow the development. We had a comment earlier on in the show about thanking us here at the Carolina Weather Group for continuing to talk about Helene and the Carolinas. It's the least we can do. It's a very unfortunate and historic disaster that has occurred right here in our backyard where we all live, work, and love. And so the story will not be going away anytime soon for us, as we promise to continue to follow this in the weeks and months to come. And one of the ways we intend to do that is by spotlighting local businesses in portions of Western North Carolina that have reopened. We started in the Boone area this weekend. We're excited to share another one with you right now.
Portions of Western North Carolina are reopening after devastating impacts from Helene, and one of those areas is the greater Boone area. As part of our efforts here at the Carolina Weather Group to help the people and businesses of Western North Carolina, the Carolina Weather Group is offering free ad time to businesses impacted by the storm. One of those businesses is Shipley Farms, and joining us now, Gray Shipley, the owner. Welcome to the show, Gray.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. I'm glad we could do it. Tell us a little bit about Shipley Farms.
Sure. Our farm's here in Vilas. We're about 10 minutes west of Boone. Farm's been in the family for 152 years, and we do Appalachian grown pasture-raised beef. You can see over my shoulder here, we've got our new farm store that we're setting up here. So we sell our beef as well as local chicken and pork and eggs and bacon and milk and a variety of things that we carry on a retail store. Also ship online, sell to some local restaurants across North Carolina, do tours and events and those types of things here as well.
How is your business impacted by Helene?
It was interesting. We were expecting a rainy day, and what we ended up with was our little 6-inch deep creek right here came up and filled the yard, moved these containers around, and flooded our store and our office and our barn. So we had flooding, we had mudslides. We don't have mudslides in the mountains, and we had 8 that I've found so far on our property. Trees down, fences destroyed. So nothing destroyed other than a few fences, but lots of washouts. Lost a couple of driveway culverts. Had some trees on some buildings. The flooding that I mentioned. And so a lot to clean up from and a lot to recover from. Fortunately, we weren't hit as hard as some others and able to start to get things back together again, but still a lot to do.
If people wanted to shop with you in person or online, how would they go about doing that?
A lot of ways that you can support the business here. We have our retail store right here. We're setting up a new one since our old one flooded. And so you can come here to file us and shop. We also sell online, Shipley Farms. Beef.com. This is our shipping box. And so we do a lot of Christmas boxes for employee and client gifts, friends and family. But you can also just order a steak or a pound of ground beef. We have subscriptions and a variety of things that we sell online as well. And then you can also see on our website lots of restaurants across this area, as well as Charlotte, Asheville, other places that use our product. So all of those ways are great ways to support the farm and help us keep going and build back.
Today I learned that if you're looking to send a holiday gift of beef or other meats to somebody for the Christmas season, the holiday season, you've got a choice to do that with a company right here in our own backyard. Is there a particular customer favorite you hear a lot about, Gray? Repeat customers ordering their favorites?
Our flagship is our ribeye. Of course, everybody loves a good ribeye, fillets and strips, but we've got some fantastic burgers and sausages as well. We make a steak burger, so we take our blend of the trim from the rib and loin and sirloin and mix it with our grind. An incredible tasting burger. And then we make our own sausages here as well. So we've got a nice sweet Italian beef sausage and a beef chorizo, and all of those are pretty fantastic as well.
Perfect. Anything else you wanted to share with our audience today?
One is I want to thank you and thank you for the outpouring of support that we've had, the relief, the aid, the volunteer assistance from the folks Samaritan's Purse, Baptist on Mission, but also volunteers that have just come up from down the mountain and shown up, said, what can we do to help? So the relief phase that we've kind of gotten through now and getting clean up and getting power back on has been tremendously helped. And so thank you to all of you that have jumped in to support that. The next phase is recovery. And so the key there is getting healthy communities, and healthy communities are self-sustaining communities. So what's important is supporting the businesses and the jobs and getting that back up and running where we can take care of ourselves and aren't dependent on relief. And so just what you're doing, figuring out how you can support and buy local and support farms is tremendous and greatly appreciated.
Well, it's good to see you guys getting back up on your feet. I agree. The outpouring of support has been fantastic, and we'll look for that to continue however long it's needed for all those impacted by Helene. Thanks for your time today, Gray.
Well, great. Thank you. And come see us at the farm soon.
All right. It was so great to see that they've reopened, Frank, and to know that they're available for the holiday season. We look forward to spotlighting more businesses across Western North Carolina as a free thing that we can do here at the Carolina Weather Group to help with recovery efforts. Before we go on this live edition, Frank, you've got something on your mind here watching current weather playing out in our backyard. What's up?
Well, James, the concern I have right now, and I'm sure everyone in North and South Carolina has noticed that there hasn't been a whole lot of exciting weather happening since Helene. That's a good thing for the most part, at least up until now, until recent days, because obviously we've had a recovery to deal with, and it's a whole lot easier to do that recovery when you don't have thunderstorms and more hurricanes coming and extreme cold and extreme heat and things like that. Well, the problem is that because we haven't had any significant weather happen since then, it's gotten really dry across the Carolinas because a lot of places, especially in South Carolina, hasn't had any rain at all, or maybe only a trace since Helene hit. What you're looking at now is a map of percent of normal rainfall over the last 30 days. And it's now been more than 30 days since Helene hit. So you can see that a lot of South Carolina has had no rain at all. Or in some cases, those zeros are actually a trace, nothing measurable, but little dampening the ground, and that's about it. Kind of shower activity, mainly in the last few days. North Carolina, not as dry, but still pretty dry. So the point is that we've gotten dry, and actually in parts of South Carolina, we're back in drought again, down in the low country. And so I want to keep this in mind, that as it's good that we continue to have the quiet weather in western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina, where the recovery continues, although we're in decent shape in the upstate now. Western North Carolina still has a lot of recovery work to do. But because we haven't had a lot of rain, and we're getting to the point we need some, at least a few gulps of it. So hopefully we can get that to happen. The forecast is not looking so great for rain over the next couple of weeks, especially in South Carolina. But we could certainly take a rainy day right now. It sure would be nice to get that, even though it would slow the recovery down. The rest of the Carolinas really do need some rain now.
Yeah, I think I've gotten about a quarter inch the whole month here at my house. And believe it or not, there's still a garden going because we haven't had a freeze yet. So like you mentioned, a silver lining to all of this, but a little raindrop, at least in moderation, even if it was outside the mountains, that would be great. Fingers crossed. So.
Right.
That's a really good point, Frank. Thank you so much for that. And things are quiet in the tropics, as you mentioned too, and we'll hope that maybe that stays that way too. We'll see.
Right, quiet for the moment. We'll be watching out from the Caribbean for a potential development or two starting about a week from now. So we'll be paying attention to that, and hopefully that stays away. And we would like a rainy day. We would not like another deluge.
Correct. That has been the year in a nutshell, hasn't it? It's been
it's been feast or famine, especially here in South Carolina. I've been talking about that in my weather alerts. That we were bone dry for a month and a half, 2 months, and then along came Debbie, and then we were bone dry until Helene hit, and then we've been bone dry since.
Yeah, and PTC 8 for those of you along the Wilmington and Carolina Beach area.
Oh yeah, don't forget about that little critter.
Oh, that little sneaky critter. All right, well, Frank, thank you so much for that point. Thanks to Julia, Evan, Tom, and Scotty. Evan will be back with us next week on the Carolina Weather Group. We're going to be looking at satellite imagery, trying to understand some of the visual changes to western North Carolina in the days and months here after Helene. So please, we encourage you to get subscribed so that you can see that episode with us. And as we showed you earlier, we had a big 500th episode celebration of the Carolina Weather Group coming your way later this month, and it'll be available first to our Patreon supporters and coming soon our new YouTube memberships. We'll be running both of those things in parallel. Whatever suits your fancy will be available to you. But for now, on behalf of Frank, I'm James here in Charlotte. Thanks for watching the Carolina Weather Group.